Cash. Now, every entrepreneur knows it's like oxygen. Without it, even the most valuable asset rapidly becomes junk. Which is why in 2014, when the Modi government took over, I had advocated a TARP, T-A-R-P, like rescue plan for our economy. Then, of course, I had advocated it as a solution to the twin balance sheet problem. And now I think it can very quickly arrest the IL&FS contagion. Let's begin with a bit of history to give you a context of what I'm recommending. Lehman filed for bankruptcy on 15 September 2008. Markets plunged, threatening the global economy with a very disorderly collapse, if you would recall what happened those days. But to the US government, Uncle Sam's credit, it swiftly got into emergency mode. In less than 3 weeks, mind that, in less than 3 weeks, on the 3rd of October 2008, President George Bush signed the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, also known as TARP, or the Troubled Asset Reconstruction Program. The US Treasury resolved to buy $700 billion of distressed assets or pump cash directly into bankrupt balance sheets. Now, $245 billion was given to banks, $70 billion to the insurance giant AIG, $80 billion was used to rescue auto companies like GM and Chrysler, and the rest was given to a clutch of endangered entities. Now, it's a tribute to TARP's effectiveness that only $410 billion was ultimately used. $290 billion was never needed to be drawn down. Cash that was given under TARP was not a grant, it was not a subsidy, but an investment which the companies had to pay back with an appropriate return. Yet at that time the Congressional Budget Office initially estimated that $356 billion out of the $700 billion would be irretrievable. That is, it would need to be written off. But the lawmakers, the US lawmakers then, were quite happy to actually burn this cash because they were out to save their economy. They understood that the promise of immediate dollars, straight right up cash, that would obviate a systemic meltdown. Now, how I sometimes wish the Modi economic team had the same understanding of market psychology. Finally, as opposed to the feared loss of $356 billion, TARP ended with a zero loss. Mind that, zero loss, and by some estimates, even a marginal gain for the US Treasury. Today, of course, merely a decade later, the American economy, which was almost thought to have melted down, is in the pink of health, with the US markets at a record high, annualized growth nicking 4%, which is very high for the US, and unemployment falling below 5%, which also shows very, very high economic growth potential in the economy. Frankly, in my book, these numbers tell you how successful TARP actually was. Now, I assert that a mini TARP for IL&FS will help ordinary Indian investors and harm crony capitalists. Let me make a few assumptions which are very close approximations of the real situation today. Number one, total capital employed by IL&FS, I'm assuming it's about 1,50,000 crore. The value of underlying monetizable assets that can be salvaged is about 1 lakh crore, which means that the write-down would be about 50,000 crores. But the amount of immediate cash or the TARP-like bailout that would be needed to stop the IL&FS defaults is about 30,000 crores. I'm making that assumption, but I think that's fairly close to the number. Now, the total market capitalization of NBFCs that has been lost, that has been wiped out, obliterated in the markets after the first IL&FS default is about 4 lakh crore, 400,000 crore rupees. That's the amount of wealth destruction that's happened in NBFCs. As per the current situation, without a TARP-like intervention by the Modi government. That's exactly what's happening right now. The Modi government hasn't intervened. If we look at the current situation, IL&FS's equity and debt holders have, as I told you, lost about 50,000 crores. That's the total capital value of 1,50,000 crores minus the salvageable asset value of about 1 lakh crore. But you know, innocent, ordinary investors like you, like me, like millions of others who've invested their money in NBFCs, we have lost 4 lakh crores, 400,000 crores. That's the market cap wipeout. Now imagine if the Modi government had created a mini TARP for IL&FS by infusing 30,000 crores under a superior rights instrument, which would simply ensure that the defaults that IL&FS has been making would immediately stop. Now, IL&FS's equity and debt holders in this situation, in the TARP-like situation, would have lost 80,000 crores. That's 30,000 crore rupees more than the 50,000 crores that they are losing in the current non-TARP situation. And finally, even if we make the rather generous assumption that only half, while a lot of people would tell you more than that, but let's make the generous assumption that only half the market cap losses of NBFCs were on account of IL&FS's default. Remember, these defaults would not have occurred had the Modi government created a mini TARP for IL&FS. If that assumption holds, we see an immediate gain of 200,000 crores, 2 lakh crores for ordinary investors like you and me, people who put money in NBFCs. So, you know, there you are. By not going for a TARP-like bailout, Prime Minister Modi has given an extra gain of 30,000 crore to crony-capitalists who allowed IL&FS to crash because their losses are only 50,000 crores when they would have been 80,000 crores under TARP, while levying an extra 200,000 crore on ordinary innocent investors like you, like me. Now, you know, the above is very simple arithmetic, but a team of IAS babus or bureaucrats will never understand it because they are just deeply suspicious of market forces. In the end, all hapless ordinary investors who've lost a lot of money can only ask, "Ye kya kar diya Pradhan Mantri Modi ji? What has your government done, my dear Prime Minister Modi?"